Well, whose idea, I guess, was the club? I guess is probably a good place to start.
Mm-hmm. Well, Robin Weatherald's the best man to tell you that, who started up the club in '64, whose phone number I have.
Sort of when we started the club up, it was started basically, I was still playing in the first year for Port Willunga, and we started up the club as a Colts team. And I can remember for the first time in my life, I visited the Christies Beach Hotel every Saturday and Friday night selling raffle tickets to fund the organisation.
Is that before the club started or after?
Oh, that was starting the club. That's how we started it.
Mm. And what gave you the idea?
What gave us the idea? On the way to watching a final in in Adelaide,
yeah.
Oval, Brian Berry and myself, who were key members of the Port Willunga Football Club, had a weekend off. So we were driving up Beach Road towards Adelaide watch the football, and we went past the new primary school in Christies Beach, and we noticed a huge crowd of people there. Absolutely amazing. Never seen so many people in all my life.
This is about 1961?
1961, I think it was, yeah. And we stopped, got out the car and had a look, and there was a bloody great heap of people playing soccer. And so off we went to the football. And all the way to the football we discussed this phenomenon. I said, it's about time we did something. At the time both Brian and I were new residents. Brian was living just down behind the Oval in a new house, and I was the very first resident to live up on Gulfview Road in the Housing Trust establishment there when it was very built. And I'd been there probably 2 or 3 years, and all the people started moving in. One of my next door neighbours was Bevan Canal, and my immediate next door neighbour was Sergeant Bruce Stevens. And Brian and I discussed the situation.
So there was opportunity all around you, basically.
Oh yeah, I had a young son, and I think Brian had a son at that age too. And we said, well, hell, we've got to do something about this. Christies Beach is, booming. There's no doubt about that. So we came back and discussed getting together a group of local individuals. Now, Brian and I were both very familiar with Harold Seaman, who was a former Glenelg football committeeman and a local resident, just lived more than a couple of 100 yards from where we're standing now. And we said, well, we're going to go and see Harold and have a chat to him. And we told him that it's about time we started up a football club at Christies Beach. And Harold was fully in agreement with that. So I gathered up a group of residents from around the area, Bevan Canal, and Bevan worked at the refinery, and there was Frank Chapman. There's a number of names that are slipping me at the moment on the honour board down there.
Yeah.
And we gathered some of those blokes up and formed a small working group and committee, and we nominated that we had to start with a kids team, so we organised a Colts side. And we called a public meeting, and we utilised Bruce Stevens and the new Inspector of Police, who was just moved into Christies Beach. He was a man of fairly high standing, and we expected a fair amount of trouble at the meeting, where we were sort of breaking away from Port Willunga.
Because you were still playing at this time?
Yes. And Port Willunga sort of were not very happy about what we were doing. Also, my father was the president of Port Willunga Football Club at the time too, so that was even more salt in the wound. But it was something that had to be done, and like we had the capacity to do that.
Certainly, you had no issues with Port Willunga.
Oh no, I was very happy playing at Port Willunga.
Well, your dad was the president.
Yeah, and we were on the cusp of a huge wave. You know, I'd spent probably, I think, 13 years. No, it was about 10 years playing at Port Willunga, and you know, we used to regularly get thrashed by 10 to 15 goals by Willunga year after year, and we'd got to the stage where we had Willunga's number and could beat them. It was, you know, golden days in football terms, but it was just that the environment here was just electric, in as much that this area was going to boom and grow enormously with the oil refinery being built and operating. Down the bottom end there was Christies Beach Hotel with not a thing around it, sitting there all on its own. And you know, the men from the refinery used to go down and have a beer, and so I used to spend all Saturday afternoons there combing the bar, raising money to fund the football club. And initially, to fund it, I put my hand in my own pocket for quite a lot of that.
And that was for what sort of things?
Oh, just administratively, running a football club's not a cheap operation. There's registrations and there's club memberships and joining the league and all of that. Now, I have to mention that Brian Berry, who was the mate was with me, he was a bloke that had very strong administrative skills, and he was at that time also the secretary of the Port Willunga Football Club Social Committee, so he was pretty heavily organising in that. But you know,
but he certainly had a background that was going to be helpful.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Without Brian, it wouldn't have been possible, because you know, we just put in all of that administrative hard work. And I had a strong background in league affairs and knowing how the system operated within the Southern Football League, because my father was also a member of the league on the what's name, so I knew a fair bit about the structure of how to get it all going. And so we set up a Colts team, which in the very first year was very successful.
Immediately?
Yes.
You didn't have a ground at this stage though, did you?
No, this is the ground, and that's an interesting subject. My father was also a local government councillor at the time, and the Christies Beach councillor was lived down the road, and I can't forget, I've lost his name too, who I knew quite well. And so I gathered up my father and the other local councillor and said to them, you know, we want to get the Bice Oval. Now, this was just a vacant piece of land with virtually nothing here.
So there was nothing here?
No. So the council had their offices and chambers just over alongside where the drive-in theatre was. And anyhow, we were able to encourage the council to invest in this particular exercise, although morally they gave us only moral support, and they helped us with the building of the old, very ugly set of toilet block, which is just out the back. And we also used our fundraising to secure a Nissan hut, which was from Army disposals or whatever, and we put that at the back of the toilets. And that was a huge and innovative exercise in those days. This ground was just quite virgin and had no water supply or anything. The pipe that you see around the fence line, we put all that in and connected it to water supply, and we actually planted all of this oval. I spent many days and nights coming here and changing. We bought an irrigation system, which you had pipes and you had to move them and lay them and relay them and that to water the oval. And we quickly established a very fine oval surface. I think there was 3 of us planted it in one day with small seed behind a small implement. Bevan Cannell was also somebody that was of great value in the establishment of this ground, because Bevan shift worked, and I was working day shift down at my job at Port Willunga in a butcher shop, so I didn't have much time in the daytime to shift sprinklers, but between Bevan and myself we irrigated and watered this oval to a standard which came up in an amazing fashion, and I think in our first or second year we actually encouraged 2 league teams from Adelaide to come and play a trial match here because the surface was of such high quality and standard.
Then they came.
They did.
And that was Glenelg South, or?
I think it's something like that. It was Glenelg something because Harold Seaman had a bit of a finger in that particular pie.
Yes.
Harold was invaluable to the whole exercise because he offered us credibility, and he was a seasoned administrator and offered, you know, the stability of an organisation that wasn't just sort of, you know, 2 young bucks flying off and doing their thing.
Because energy's fine, but organisation's good too.
So we developed a rapidly developing club, in as much that in our second year we entered A grade and a B grade team, I think. Was it? And we actually...
I think you started in 61 and then it was 64, is that right? When the...
I don't know, I haven't got all those dates.
When the seniors came in, I think it was a couple of years. I think.
Was it? Because we...
Maybe it was 2 years of juniors.
2 years of juniors.
And then...
Then we started a B grade, was it? No, I'm not sure.
Oh, was that right? Yeah.
I'd have to look at the records.
But certainly it wasn't very long before you actually won an A grade premiership.
Yes, we started off the first season. We played under Bill. Oh, I can't think of Bill's.
You played under Bill.
Yeah, and we lost every game in the first half of the season. Then by half the way through the season, we clicked, and by the end of the season, we basically were undefeated. Even the top sides we rolled, but we hadn't got enough to get into the finals.
But you were certainly set up for the next year.
Oh, next year was just incredible. We had a magnificent year for a fledgling club, and we had a team of young individuals that were really keen to get out there and strut our stuff.
And prove themselves, because I believe John Hall had played in a reserves premiership the year before he came here. But how did Christies get so good so quick?
Well, Bill Heron's got to take Bill Heron, Jim Gulliver, who was a ruckman, the best and fairest in their first year. Bill Heron was a carnival player in 61 in Brisbane, and he was 3rd in the McGarry medal and captained the Bays. A great mentor. He's one of my closest mates now. Kingsley Butcher 7. 7 of us came from Port Willunga, a 3rd of the team.
So, you know, it's not the whole team or anything like that.
No.
Where did the other players come from?
There was John Hibbert from Victoria. There was Frankie Howard, who played with Billy at the Glenelg, that came down from Tanunda. There was vice captain was John O'Leary, that came from Edwardstown. There was Hayden Brooks, that played for the ANZ Bank. There was Alan Hayes, that came from McLaren Flat Football Club. There was Fen Thompson from the Walkerville Football Club, that played state football for the amateur league. Was in the surf club with us. Peter Lang, ironically enough, came from Willunga. He was my school teacher at Willunga High School.
I was going to say, because you got the Willunga High photo there.
That's right. Well, Peter Lang was my teacher. I ran into him up at Blackwood the other day. He's 73 years of age. He's about 5 or 6 years older than me. And he came to Christies and played in that premiership on a back flank. And he played in the 64 Willunga premiership prior to that.
Johnny Hall again, and on that little right foot and beautiful pass.
In 71 we had a fella called Hayden Creek at full back, played for Sturt under 19s, built like a Sherman tank. He played had a great year at full back. Again, Alan Fox from the first 2 premierships played in the 71 team as well, at centre half back. We had 2 or 3 guys come from Flinders University who played for them in amateur league. People like Jim Gray.
Jim Gray again, number 8. Oh, slips over.
Paul Urban, who was our vice captain and rover. Wonderful little footballer.
Paul Urban having a shot for goal. I'd say should be another one.
Barry Moore, built like a Sherman tank, played on the back flank. 30 years of age, played in 70 and struggled to get in the A grade. Brian said, you go on the back flank and anything that comes out, we want you to repel. And he used to do these long raking drop kicks off a back flank. What's a drop kick now? No one would know what a drop kick was.
Great way.
So anyway, and then there was Ian Lieberneck again on the wing, as I described before in that 68 premiership as a colt. We had a fellow called Craig Thompson who played on the wing. He came from Blackwood. We used to call him Scruffy. Fantastic wingman. No one ever beat him. He was unbelievable.
Craig Thompson going for the ball here, never gives in.
A fellow called Rick Ball that played for South Adelaide, had a few league games with South. He had a good year. A fellow called Peter Vivian played centre half forward from Glenelg Seconds.
There's Peter Vivian having a shot number 3. About centre half forward.
He was a good player. The Eckerman, there were 3 Eckermans. There was Keith Eckerman, there was John Eckerman, and there was Jeff Eckerman. 3 Eckermans. John was cousin to Keith, to Keith and Jeff, and those 3 Eckermans, boy, were they good players. John played in the back pocket, Jeff played on the back flank, and Keith played on the wing. They all came from the Clare region. All very, very good players. They played in that undefeated premiership. Ray Newell from Rosewater, very, very good back flanker. Again, built like a Sherman tank.
As they all are at Rosewater.
As they would be down that way, that's right. So we had, again, starting over again, we had the influx of some very good players from, that were dedicated, but the leadership of Ryan Threegold as captain and coach was outstanding, led from the front. Same way Billy Heron did. We were very fortunate. Both those guys were centremen and absolute ball getters, and they were tough and great role models for young guys like us to follow.
So I was going to ask, what brought those guys? Because there wasn't the same sort of money in it then.
No, I don't think there was. I mean, in those days, God, if you got 10 or 15 bucks a game, you were lucky. I mean, these days they're getting 500 north of 500, aren't they, in the country? There's some serious money around. So really, if you played in a premiership, what's the money got to do with it? It's the photo on the wall to say you've been in a premiership, isn't it? And that's how most people felt.
At the start there, you brought all these players there, and it's a brand new club, so probably you and the others, I mean, you came looking for senior football, which is fair enough, but you had all that success, so you brought good players. What brought them to the club? I mean, probably they weren't expecting big success in, straight away, 67.
No, we weren't, but I think it gets back to the fact in 67 that we had a great leader and mentor in Bill Heron. We had some key guys. You had us young guys that were learning the caper.
Johnny Hall again, and on that little right foot and beautiful pass.
But you also had some key strengths like Bill Heron, like Frank Howard, that were experienced 30-year-old men that had been there and done it.
And they were known.
We had John Hibbert that played for St Dominic's in Victoria. It was a second rover to Frankie. And he was a Victorian, he had all the footy smarts, So you have people like that coming in the team. You had John O'Leary, straight away slotted at full back. Now, John played full back for Edwardstown. And again, a 27-year-old, 28-year-old experienced man that knew the caper. You had Bob Seaman and Paul Castle coming out of the 65 Port Noarlunga's A-grade premiership, along with Sid Cox, who played full forward, centre forward in that Port Noarlunga premiership team. And Sid Cox had played in that. So you had 4 guys coming out of the Port Noarlunga 65 premiership, plus a couple of us that played in the 65 B-grade premiership, plus, you've got Peter Campbell coming from Barmah, who was the best winger going around. So in answer to your question, you had a sprinkling of experience and guys that were football heads in that team that knew the caper, to which young guys like us could learn from and be part of. It was a very, very good team.
We got a photo here somewhere of the Willunga High School A-grade team, John Hall and myself and Billy Bagshaw, Tony Berg, and some really good footballers in that, not including me, but some blokes who went on to play league football. Mm-hmm. And that's around somewhere. A bloke called Thompson, one of the teachers, used to play for West Adelaide, was the coach.
Mm-hmm. Well, that photograph's on John Hall's wall.
Is that? There you go. He's in it. Yeah, Hawley's in it.
I was going to ask about Willunga High School there. That was obviously a good team.
Well, that was Willunga High School. We were coached by Colin Thompson, who played 200 games for West Adelaide.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Mm.
He played in the premiership with Brighton when he was nearly 40.
Yeah.
He lives up here at Happy Valley. I run into him now and again, actually. But that particular Willunga High School team had a fella called Tony Bergen in it.
Yeah, right.
He played 244 games for Sturt and played in 5 premierships for Sturt.
They breed footballers at Willunga, don't they?
Oh, Bill Bagshaw's in there, and his brother Paul Bagshaw was a legend. You know, played, I think, 360 games for Sturt and 14 for the state.
Could play.
Like, he could play a bit, couldn't he?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that particular team at Willunga High School had and I'll tell you another bloke that's in that team at Willunga. Do you remember Daryl Cotton of the Zoot, the band? Daryl Cotton. The band was called the Zoot.
I remember.
Passed away a couple of years ago. Well, he's a little blonde fella in the front there. He was a very good singer, and he died. I think it might have been pancreatic cancer. I'm not sure. 2 or 3 years ago, but yeah, there was some good players in there that played for Willunga, McLaren Vale, various teams around the district.
We had a lot of very young people at that stage playing for us, and they were pretty well all resident locals, which was, something that is not common these days, where there's a lot of imports. Anyhow, we had what you would call a fantastic year. We played basically 3 years of top football in this league, and we were going for our 3rd premiership in a row, and then disaster hit. All of it which was my fault, and probably something that had an enormous impact on my life. I think one thing that happened was that after the exercise evolved, I walked away and never joined a committee for something like 30 years.
My goodness, so it really did affect you. Because this was the losing of the points, wasn't it?
Well, no, it was actually a grand final that we were going to win, our 3rd one in a row.
Oh, really?
And we had a row, enormous row. I was treasurer of the club and had been right from its inception. And what I'd been doing was amassing quite a bit of money. And I had a major grand plan to build a grandstand behind me, of fairly considerable. There was several $100,000 in the project. And the committee revolted in as much that they were so keen on celebrating their 3rd grand final in a row that they decreed that they were going to have a hell of a big party and give away a lot of free grog.
They raided the kitty.
Well, they were going to, yeah, well, they did. And that all happened about just after we'd bolted in the 2nd semi-final against Ranella. I think we won by 10 or 12 goals, and we were lined up for the grand final in 2 weeks. The decision was made about this big party, and I said to the coach, well, I said, you can count me out, I'm not going to bloody play. If they're going to blow the money like that, stuff that, I worked my guts out for people to have a big party.
Because that was a lot of your raffle tickets, isn't it?
Oh,
well, among other things.
Yeah, it was vision. And
it was a grandstand then.
Yeah, and facilities that, hard won, and putting money together and, putting a club into a strong financial position is something that is not easy to do, because committees do like to spend money.
Yes.
And so we spent probably the next 10 days in awful turmoil in the club. I ended up playing in the grand final, but I may as well have stayed home. And we lost. And we would probably been, 10 to 1 on to win that. And we were absolutely thrashed by Ranella in the grand final. And a large degree of that was my fault. And I wore an awful lot of blame too.
My goodness.
And that's probably one of the major reasons why there's a black hole in the records of the football club, because if you look at the honour board there, the first 4 or 5 years don't exist. And what occurred was, you know, a very major blue, because I up and walked. There's no bloody way that, you know, and I was probably a fairly strong, vigorous character, in as much that I was at the time running a business on Beach Road, and I'd started my own butchering business, and was probably pretty vocal in what I said and did.
Yeah. And you were possibly right as well.
Oh well, there's ways of doing things. I just had too much high hopes and visions for this club. One of the projects that we, at one stage, went and had an interview with the chairman of the Football League with the view of inviting Glenelg to relocate to Christies Beach at that particular time, and that was before Neil Curley moved it to take over the running of Glenelg.
And they were struggling at the time.
They were more than struggling, they were just non-existent to a large degree. They were a liability to the league in Adelaide.
They would have stayed Glenelg, or they would have become...
Oh, this is just two young bucks' dreams that we had the balls to go and talk to the Football League about that. Now that's bullshit, of course, in terminology, and we didn't get laughed out, but you know, they said, well, they admired our fortitude, I think.
Yeah. That's ballsy.
That's the sort of vision that we had, that we thought that we could turn this oval into a major football ground. But of course, you know, with the evolution and what's happened here and other developments, you know, this has changed enormously. One has to look over the horizon here and just admire that when I was first going to primary school, and in the years about when I was talking in the 1950s, between here and Adelaide, there was only 2 places there you could see a tree. This was a treeless environment.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah.
Absolutely treeless. There was trees on a small farm at back of Morford Vale, and there was back towards Ranella, near Halloran Hill, there was a farm there that had a group of trees behind it, and there was no other trees in sight on this plain. So,
and that was up until recent times, because I remember that as a kid.
Oh, well, you wouldn't go back as far as I do. All we used to see was you go down over the Halloran's Hill down onto the plains, and you sort of head towards the Glenelg tram line, and that was all full of boxhorns and a few market gardens.
Yep.
So,
well, it really only all changed in the 70s.
Yes.
And I was born in '69, so I remember. I mean, and I'm only 45, but I remember what you're talking about.
Yeah. Well, I left here in 1975, and we sold up all of our property in Port Willunga, Christies Beach and Victor Harbour, and moved to the upper southeast. So I got well away from the environment.
Was that anything to do with the bust up at the football club? Or?
No, that had all happened and was over and done with. Because
how long? When did you patch up with the football club?
Oh, I sort of supported them afterwards when they, the second group, they had, wasn't long afterwards, and they got back together again and had another good team. Went for 3 years and tried to win 3 premierships in a row again.
Well, famously went undefeated in, what was it, 73?
Yeah, probably. That was when Bluey and...
Or maybe it was 71 I'm thinking of. 71, I think.
I'm not sure, I'd have to look at the what's the name, the honour board, but the significant things that triggered the development of the Christies Beach Football Club was the large number of people that were supporting soccer in and around the community. And I don't know where all of those people actually came from, because in that particular time there was very little in Christies Beach at all. And the new housing development was just starting, if it was started at that particular time. But anyhow, because I lived as a Port and Willunga boy, I moved over the hill and came up onto Golfview Road and was living with people like Bevan Cannell, John O'Leary, who worked for me, and John was probably a stalwart of the Christies Beach Football Club for many, many years, and supported the club in many ways. He played in the same teams that I did, and played at fullback, and was one of our, very strong players.
Can I just ask, who came up with the colours of the jumper?
Who came up with that? Well, we basically looked at what we had in there, and I was a St Kilda fan at the time. And we actually wrote to St Kilda and got some jumpers off of them.
Yep.
So that's for the Colts. Yep. And they paid for them.
The rest is history.
Yeah.
Yep. It's a funny thing.
That's
Yeah.
just
Oh, it's a great jumper.
yeah. Oh, well, and there wasn't anything like that in our area, so I've been able to catch up with Brian. He's living in Melbourne somewhere. And he probably a bit like me, a bit disaffected, I don't know. Felt a bit rejected in as much that without his efforts, it'd be hard to imagine the football club would have, because he set up such a solid administrative base. And like we had, Harold was president, I was the treasurer, and Brian was the secretary. And we just used to call meetings as we required them.
That's pretty massive. Yeah.
And my job was just to get the money together to make the organisation work.
Just. And it's still here, you did it.
That was something that I was reasonably good at and have been doing for a long time. So.
Yeah. No, it's magnificent what you managed to achieve. The fact that it's still here and will be here for a long time to come.
Oh yeah, and like, you see the lights there now. Yeah, they're a modern version of we built, and the blokes from the oil refinery, welding and that, they built the steel for the structures for the lights, and we put them up and built them, ourselves. So everything was done on even the mounds and that basically all come from the oil refinery. And before we started doing this, it's been done all over the place. Port and Willunga got the idea, and all the other teams around, when there's been major sewage and drainage works done, have collected the dirt and put mounds around their ovals. So, we actually were the first ones to start all that rubbish.
Which is it's a good idea.
Especially in this area, yeah.
It creates more of an atmosphere in the ground.
Oh, well, this was a bloody windy spot.
Well, it's on top of a hill, mate.
A windy spot. It's sort of, it was never going to be much of an oval. But
well, for spectators anyway.
Yeah, and there was the old bloke, John Bice, the Honourable John Bice. He was still alive in Port and Willunga at that particular stage, which the ground was named after. And
Who actually owned the land?
Well, it was held by the council. It was part of the subdivision of the land, and it was just designated the Bice Memorial Oval.
So there was actually an oval here. So there was.
Well, it was provision piece of land.
Yeah, well, there was land here that was set aside.
It wasn't in too good a condition.
No, you created it, made it into. Certainly helps, though.
Yeah, well, and the ability to coordinate the local government structure and that, because it wouldn't have been able to do it without probably, the help of my father, and Keith Castle was the other name. And his son played football here. Keith was the councillor for Christies Beach at that particular time. Perhaps should also mention one of the key persons in the history of this club was Bruce Stevens.
Yep.
Bruce took over as secretary after Brian. he lived immediately alongside of me, and because of his stature in the police force and that, and his interest in youth and keeping kids out of trouble, Bruce was a great supporter of this club, and put in a huge amount of energy and time in making sure that some of the more difficult issues were handled, because he was a man of some stature, and he was a fairly top-ranking sort of bloke at his time, and he was a very keen club member.
Because of course football clubs do an enormous amount of doing great service for the community, don't they? And getting
Well,
kids discipline and something to do.
in that particular time, when we this whole area was really, there was virtually none of those houses there. Just on top of the hill there, was where the housing trust started, and kicked into gear. And once that started there, they then built houses quite quickly and filled up with employees from the refinery, and that's where Bevan Canoe, he worked in the chemistry department and area of the refinery there. So you had all of these young people moving into here with families, and they needed some sporting and recreational areas for them. So the growth and the development of this club was just quite electric, of a nature that when you're starting a club from scratch, with nothing, no assets, no nothing, just an idea that there was a need, was a significant and very rewarding now to come back and look at it. You say, well, it certainly was worth all of the effort.
Thank you very much and congratulations.
You never know.
All right, good on you. We'll leave it there.
Okay.
All right, thanks very much again.
You better grab your mic.
I'll grab the microphone. I'll grab that one off you.
He was hated. Barry hated that bloke.
Well, John Hall's got a story about Robin Weatherald getting missing out in the grand final, I think, for punching Barry McDonald.
got suspended.
Oh, geez.
Didn't they?
One of the many times he punched Barry McDonald. Sorry, go on.
Something like taking a wheelbarrow out and going to cart his body off the oval or something. Something stupid like that.
Got a bit nasty.
That's what his father used to say to stir him up, apparently, on the sidelines. So he's obviously a legend.
Oh, he's a knuckler. Oh, he was unbelievable.
Well, they were hard men in hard times then.
Well, he missed out on the 65 premiership because he donged the best player from the opposition
Who'd he
in
dong?
the second semi. Barry McDonald, that was centre-half forward for Willunga, who was the best centre-half forward in the comp, and Robin's old man used to G him up. He used to say, Robin, get them, Robin, kill them, Robin. I'll get the wheelbarrow, you knock them over and I'll cart them away. It's serious. His old man was like, local butcher.
Really? So he was serious about carting them away?
Oh, absolutely. I remember as a kid down there at McLaren Vale, he's walking up and down the side of the ground with this wheelbarrow saying, Robin, you get them and I'll cart them away.
That must have been intimidating for the other team.
Oh, they were rough and ready days. You got no idea.